At 5:07 a.m., I stood at the Greyhound terminal with nothing but my purse, a single suitcase, and a silence in my chest that was louder than any applause I'd never received. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an unnatural glow across the worn tile floor. Outside, the darkness of early morning was just beginning to give way to the first hints of dawn. Back at the office, 60 employees would soon be expecting a catered company lunch I was supposed to cook, alone. My phone buzzed in my pocket for the third time in 10 minutes. I didn't need to look to know it was Blake Townsend, my boss, wondering where I was, why the office kitchen wasn't already filled with the aromas of a feast in progress. His voice still echoed in my mind from yesterday. "You've got this. Samantha, you're always the one who delivers. Make it happen." But this time, I didn't. For once, I wasn't going to burn myself for people who'd never even thank me for the ashes. The station was nearly empty, just a few bleary-eyed travelers scattered across uncomfortable plastic seats. A janitor pushed his mop across the floor, the squeak of his wheels marking time like a metronome. I checked. The departure board. 5:30 a.m. to Cleveland. 23 minutes of freedom left. My phone buzzed again. This time I pulled it out and stared at the screen. 4 missed calls from Blake, 2 from HR, and a string of increasingly frantic Slack messages. "Where are you? Sam, did you forget about today? The CEO is going to be here at noon. Samantha, call me back immediately." I turned off my phone and slipped it back into my pocket. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. How did I get here? How did Samantha Hayes, once an ambitious college graduate with dreams of corporate success, end up fleeing her job at 5 a.m. rather than cooking lunch for an entire company? It started 8 years ago when I joined Urbanus & Coers as an administrative assistant in Columbus, Ohio. Fresh. Out of college with a business degree that had cost more than my parents' house, I was eager to prove myself. Back then, Urbanus was a mid-sized consulting firm with about 20 employees. The office was small but growing, and I was told there would be plenty of room for advancement. What they didn't tell me was that advancement didn't mean promotions or raises. It meant accumulating responsibilities no one else wanted. It began innocently enough. I stayed late to finish projects. I came in early to prepare for meetings. I remembered everyone's birthdays and brought in homemade cupcakes. I was the first to volunteer when something needed to be done, thinking it would get me noticed, appreciated, promoted. And I was noticed, just not in the way I'd hoped. "Samantha always comes through," became the office mantra. "Ask Sam, she'll handle it." 3 years into the job, my manager quit suddenly before the annual company retreat. With no one to organize it, I offered to help temporarily. The retreat included lunch for the whole team, all 20 people back then. I prepared a simple but elegant spread, homemade sandwiches, a couple of salads, fresh fruit, and cookies. The praise came flooding in. "This is better than catering. Sam, you've outdone yourself." Blake, who had recently been promoted to director, gave me a thumbs up and the words that would haunt me for years to come. "You saved the day, Sam. We couldn't do this without you." Those words felt good at the time. I basked in the recognition, the feeling of being essential. What I didn't realize was that I'd just volunteered for a permanent, unpaid position as company chef. As Urbanus grew, so did my invisible job description. The company merged with a smaller firm, then another. 20 employees became 30, then 40, then 60. And still, whenever there was a company event, eyes turned to me. "Sam will handle the food. Samantha's cooking is our secret weapon." It wouldn't be an Urbanus-y event without Sam's touch. Never mind that I had actual work to do. Reports to file, meetings to coordinate, clients to placate. Never mind that cooking for 60 people required days of preparation, hundreds of dollars in supplies, reimbursed eventually after multiple reminder emails, and hours of my personal time. Never mind that not once in 8 years had anyone offered to help. I'd become the office mom, the nurturer, the provider, roles I never applied for but somehow couldn't escape. And with each event, each potluck, each birthday celebration, the weight of expectation grew heavier. Until yesterday, when it finally became too much to bear. It was a Wednesday afternoon. I was at my desk, racing to finish a client proposal due by end of day, when Blake appeared beside me, casual as could be. "Sam, quick question." He leaned against my desk, his expensive watch catching the light. "For Friday's Q3 lunch and awards ceremony, isn't that being catered?" I interrupted, already feeling my stomach tighten. The quarterly ceremony was our biggest event, always professionally catered. Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Well, about that. Budget cuts. You know how it is. I stared at him, waiting for him to continue, praying he wasn't about to say what I thought he was. So I was thinking, since your food is always better than catering anyway. He flashed his trademark smile, the one that charmed clients and melted resistance. You could whip something up, nothing fancy, maybe a few hot dishes, a pasta bar, desserts. You always make it magical. I felt the blood drain from my face. For all 60 employees? You've done it before, he said, as if reminding me I'd once helped an old lady cross the street. Come on, don't overthink it. I'll send you the list of dietary needs. Oh, and we'll need it ready by noon sharp on Friday. The CEO's flying in? He didn't wait for my answer. He didn't need to. In 8 years, I'd never said no. I sat there, staring at my computer screen, no longer seeing the words of the proposal. All I could think about was what lay ahead. Shopping for ingredients tonight, prep work tomorrow evening after a full day at the office, waking up at 3 a.m. on Friday to cook for hours before work, and no one, not a single person, had considered what this meant for me. That evening, I cried in my car under the flickering streetlight of the company parking lot. I remembered last year's lunch, 13 hours on my feet, spending my own money when the reimbursement form got lost, missing my sister's birthday dinner because I was too exhausted to drive across town. My back ached, my spirit broke. And for the first time in 8 years, I asked myself a dangerous question. What if I just didn't? That question followed me home, sat with me as I mechanically made dinner, watched me as I opened my laptop to create yet another spreadsheet for a company event. What if I just didn't do it? I started making the list anyway. Shopping items, prep schedule, cooking timeline. My hands moved automatically, but my mind was elsewhere, swimming through 8 years of just this once, and we couldn't do it without you. And you're a lifesaver, Sam. At midnight, I closed my laptop and stared at the ceiling. The spreadsheet was complete, a minute-by-minute plan for how I would once again deliver the impossible. It would cost me a night's sleep, probably $200 of my own money until reimbursement, if it came, and what little remained of my dignity. And for what? A few murmured thanks between bites? Blake's thumbs up as he hurried past with a plate piled high? The CEO not even noticing who had cooked the meal he was eating? I fell into a restless sleep, dreaming of endless kitchens and mountains of dirty dishes. At 2:45 a.m., my alarm went off. Friday morning, time to begin the cooking marathon. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at my shoes. And that dangerous question came back, louder this time. What if I just didn't? What if, instead of getting up and cooking for people who took me for granted, I did something for myself? What if I just left? The thought was terrifying and exhilarating. I'd never done anything like this before. I was reliable Samantha, dependable Sam, the one who always came through. But maybe that was the problem. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and opened the Greyhound website. There was a 5:30 a.m. bus to Cleveland. Without thinking too much, I booked a ticket. Then I packed a small bag, just essentials. Clothes for a few days, toiletries, my laptop. I didn't cancel the lunch. I didn't warn anyone. I didn't leave a note. For once, I was choosing myself. At 4:30 a.m., I locked my apartment door behind me and called a rideshare. The driver was sleepy but friendly, asking no questions about why a woman in her 30s was heading to the bus station before dawn. And now here I was, watching the minutes tick down to departure. 18 minutes of freedom left. I thought about all the work I was leaving behind. Not just the lunch, but the reports due next week. The meetings I was supposed to coordinate, the clients expecting my calls. I thought about the confusion that would reign when people arrived to find no food, no preparation, no Samantha. For a moment, guilt threatened to overwhelm me. I nearly grabbed my bag and ran for the exit, ready to apologize, to make it right, to be dependable Sam again. But then I remembered the look on Blake's face when he'd delegated the lunch to me. Not a hint of concern for what he was asking. Not a suggestion of help or compensation. Just expectation. As if my time, my energy, my very self belonged to Urbanus & Co. The guilt receded, replaced by a calm I hadn't felt in years. Now boarding Greyhound service to Cleveland, Ohio. All passengers please proceed to Gate 3. I stood, picked up my suitcase, and joined the small line forming at the gate. As I handed my ticket to the attendant, my phone buzzed one final time in my pocket. I ignored it. The bus was half empty, the seats worn but comfortable. I chose a spot by the window, placed my suitcase in the overhead compartment, and sat down. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten, the darkness giving way to a pale blue dawn. As the bus pulled away from the terminal, I felt a strange mixture of terror and peace. What had I done? What would happen now? Would I lose my job? Probably. Would I struggle financially? Almost certainly. Had I just destroyed 8 years of professional networking and reputation building? Yes. But I'd also reclaimed something more valuable. Myself. I watched Columbus recede in the distance, the city lights blinking like stars as we headed north. For the first time in years, I had nowhere to be. No one depending on me. No list of tasks to complete. Just hours of open road ahead and the freedom to decide what came next. The sun was rising fully now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Other passengers were stirring, some opening laptops, others settling in with books or headphones, normal people going about their normal lives. I wondered what was happening back at Urbanice. It was 6:15 a.m. now. In my original plan, I would have been 2 hours into food prep, surrounded by cutting boards and simmering pots. Instead, the kitchen would be dark and silent. By 8 a.m., someone would notice my absence. By 9 a.m., panic would begin to set in. By 10 a.m., Blake would be frantic, calling my phone repeatedly, sending increasingly desperate messages. By noon, the time the food was supposed to be ready, there would be nothing. Just an empty kitchen and 60 hungry employees, including the CEO who had flown in specially for the occasion. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, I felt a small, guilty thrill. Let them figure it out. Let them see what happened when Samantha wasn't there to save the day. Let them finally understand what they had taken for granted. As the Ohio countryside rolled past my eye, window, farms, and small towns appearing and disappearing in the morning light, I found myself smiling. Not a happy smile exactly, more the smile of someone who has just jumped from a burning building and realized, mid-fall, that the ground below is a lake, not concrete. I was falling, yes, but I might just survive the landing. My phone continued to buzz in my pocket. At some point, I would need to deal with it, with all of it. But not now. Now I just needed to breathe, to think, to be. For the first time in 8 years, I wasn't Samantha from Urbanus & Co. I was just Samantha. And I had no idea who that person was anymore. As the bus continued north toward Cleveland, I closed my eyes and let exhaustion wash over me. Whatever came next, it would come after I'd had some sleep. Real sleep, not the kind interrupted by anxiety dreams about forgotten tasks and disappointed bosses. For now, I was free. And that was enough. I woke as the bus rolled into Cleveland, the gentle brake jolting me from a dreamless sleep. For a disorienting moment, I forgot where I was and why. Then reality crashed back. I had fled my job, my responsibilities, my entire life in Columbus. The terminal in Cleveland was larger and busier than the one I'd left behind. People rushed past with purpose, dragging suitcases, checking watches, embracing loved ones. I stood still in the center of it all, suddenly aware that I had no plan beyond escape. My phone, still in my pocket, had finally stopped buzzing. Either the battery had died, or, more likely, Blake and the others had given up trying to reach me. I switched it back on briefly, wincing at the flood of notifications, 27 missed calls, 43 unread messages, countless emails. I turned it off again without reading any of them. Outside the terminal, Cleveland greeted me with chilly morning air and unfamiliar streets. I had visited once before, years ago, for a conference, but remembered little beyond the conference center and hotel. Now I was here with no itinerary, no reservations, and no return ticket. Freedom felt a lot like vertigo. I walked a few blocks until I found a small cafe with a free Wi-Fi sign in the window. Inside, the warm scent of coffee and pastries wrapped around me like a blanket. I ordered a latte and sat in a corner booth, opening my laptop to search for accommodation. Most hotels were expensive, especially on such short notice. But I found a charming bed and breakfast near Lake Erie that had a last-minute cancellation. The website showed sunny rooms with quilted bedspreads and windows overlooking the water. It was more than I would typically spend, but today wasn't typical. I booked 3 nights without allowing myself to overthink it. As I sipped my coffee, reality began to settle in. I needed to face what I had done, not just leaving the lunch, but potentially ending my career at Urbanus. Part of me wanted to craft a careful email explaining my burnout, the years of uncompensated labor, the lack of boundaries. But another part, a stronger part, knew that words wouldn't change anything. They never had before. So instead, I composed a different kind of email addressed to HR. I am taking emergency personal leave, effective immediately. I will be unreachable until Monday. Please direct any urgent work matters to Blake Townsend. Short, professional, and not remotely adequate to explain what had happened, but it was all I could offer right now. I hit send before I could change my mind, then closed my laptop. The bed and breakfast was a 20-minute rideshare away. The building was Victorian, painted pale yellow with white trim, set back from the road behind a small garden. Inside, the decor was exactly as the website had promised. Homey, comfortable, slightly old-fashioned. The owner, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and kind eyes, checked me in with minimal questions. If she thought it odd that I arrived on a Friday morning with only a small suitcase and shadows under my eyes, she didn't mention it. Room 4, top of the stairs, left at the landing. Breakfast is served from 7 to 9, but I can leave something out if you need it earlier. There's tea and cookies in the parlor all day. She handed me an actual key, not a key card, a real metal key with a tassel attached. Lake's just 2 blocks that way, nice walking path along the shore. I thanked her and climbed the stairs to my room. It was small but perfect. A queen bed with a patchwork quilt, a writing desk beneath a window, a private bathroom with a clawfoot tub, and as promised, the window offered a view of Lake Erie, its surface glittering in the late morning sun. I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted, despite having slept on the bus. The adrenaline that had carried me through the morning was, fading, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. I kicked off my shoes and lay back on the quilt, not bothering to unpack or even change clothes. Just for a moment, I told myself, just to catch my breath. When I woke again, the room was bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. I had slept for hours, dreamless and deep. My body felt heavy, reluctant to move, but my mind was clearer than it had been in months. I showered, changed, and ventured downstairs. The parlor was empty except for an elderly couple reading by the window. I helped myself to tea and cookies from a sideboard, then asked the owner, Martha, according to her name tag, for dinner recommendations. There's a lovely little Italian place 2 blocks west, she said. Family-owned, quiet, perfect for a solo dinner. Just tell them. Martha sent you. The restaurant was exactly as she described, small, intimate, with red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. The owner seated me at a corner table and brought me a glass of Chianti without being asked. Martha's friends get the good wine, he said with a wink, then left me with a menu. I ate slowly, savoring each bite of homemade pasta, each sip of rich wine. When was the last time I'd enjoyed a meal like this? Not eaten hurriedly at my desk, or standing over the sink, or not at all because I was too busy preparing food for others? After dinner, I walked to the lake. The evening was cool but pleasant, the path along the shore illuminated by antique-style lamps. Lake Erie stretched before me, vast and dark, its surface rippling with moonlight. In the distance, I could see the lights of ships moving slowly across the horizon. I found a bench and sat, watching the water and the night sky. My phone remained off in my pocket. Whatever crisis was unfolding at Urbanus, it was no longer my problem. For the first time in years, I felt the knot of anxiety in my chest begin to loosen. I breathed deeply, filling my lungs with the cool, clean air of the lakefront. I was terrified of what Monday would bring, yet simultaneously more at peace than I had been in recent memory. Back at the B&B, I finally allowed myself to turn on my phone, bracing for the onslaught of notifications. They had continued to accumulate. More missed calls, more messages, more emails. Most were from Blake, their tone evolving from confusion to anger to something approaching. Panic. Sam, where are you? This isn't like you. Is everything okay? The CEO is here and there's no food. Call me immediately. If this is about Tuesday's conversation, we can talk about it. Just come in. Samantha, your job is on the line here. The last message had come at 3:47 p.m. We need to talk. Monday morning, 9 a.m., my office. Well, at least I hadn't been fired by text message. That seemed like a small victory. There were also messages from coworkers, ranging from concerned to confused to irritated. Only one stood out. From Jen in accounting. Whatever happened, I hope you're okay. You deserve better than this place anyway. Take care of yourself. I hadn't realized Jen had noticed anything was wrong. We were friendly, but not close. Yet somehow, she had seen what others hadn't. I sent her a brief reply. I'm okay. Thank you for caring. Then I turned my phone off again and placed it on the nightstand. Tomorrow was Saturday. I had 2 full days before I needed to face the consequences of my actions. 2 days to figure out what I wanted, what I needed, what came next. I crawled into bed, pulling the quilt up to my chin. Outside my window, Lake Erie whispered against the gay shore, a sound both foreign and comforting. I had no idea what the future held, but for the first time in years, I was curious to find out. As I drifted toward sleep, a thought surfaced from the depths of my mind. I wasn't sorry I had left. I was only sorry I hadn't done it sooner. Saturday morning arrived with sunlight streaming through the lace curtains and the distant sound of waves. For a moment, I lay still, enjoying the novelty of waking without an alarm, without a to-do list already scrolling through my mind. I dressed and headed downstairs for breakfast. The dining room was charming, a large table set with mismatched china, fresh flowers in a mason jar centerpiece, and windows overlooking a garden where birds flitted among feeders. Martha served breakfast herself, fluffy. Omelets, crisp bacon, homemade biscuits with jam. She chatted easily with the other guests, the elderly couple from the parlor, a young family with twin boys, a pair of women on a weekend getaway. When she came to me, she asked no personal questions, just whether I had slept well and if I needed directions anywhere. "I'd like to find a bookstore," I said, realizing it had been months since I'd read. Anything not work-related. And maybe somewhere to sit and read afterward. She recommended a shop a few blocks away, then added, "There's a lovely cafe inside with window seats overlooking the lake. Perfect for getting lost in a book." After breakfast, I followed her directions to the bookstore, a small independent shop with wooden shelves that reached the ceiling and a resident cat sleeping in. The front window. Inside, the smell of paper, ink, and coffee created an atmosphere of calm. I browsed aimlessly, pulling books from shelves based solely on their covers or titles, reading first pages and random paragraphs. No one rushed me. No one needed anything from me. No one even knew who I was. Eventually, I selected a novel, something about a woman who abandons her life to walk the Pacific Crest Trail, and a blank journal with a blue leather cover. I took both to the cafe section, ordered a cappuccino, and settled into a window seat. The view was as promised. Lake Erie spread out before me, its surface shifting from blue to gray to green as clouds passed overhead. I opened the novel and began to read, occasionally looking up to watch sailboats or gulls or passing clouds. Hours slipped by. I finished the cappuccino, ordered lunch, then tea. I read half the novel, lost in someone else's journey of self-discovery. Outside, the day brightened, then began to fade. Still, I sat, unwilling to break the spell of this peaceful moment. Only when the cafe staff began preparing to close did I finally gather my things and head back to the B&B. The walk back was pleasant, the evening cool but not cold, the streets quiet but not deserted. I felt oddly weightless, as if I had shed some invisible burden. Back in my room, I opened the blank journal and uncapped a pen. I hadn't kept a journal since college, but suddenly I needed to capture my thoughts, to make sense of what had happened and what might come next. I began to write, hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence. I left today. Just walked away. 8 years of being Samantha the reliable, Samantha the yes woman, Samantha who cooks for 60, and I left it all behind without a word. I should feel guilty. I should feel ashamed, but I don't. I feel relieved, like I've been holding my breath for years and finally allowed myself to exhale. What happens on Monday? I don't know. I might be fired. I might quit. I might negotiate for something better, though I'm not sure what better looks like at Urbanus. But here's what I do know. I can't go back to being that Samantha anymore. The one who says yes to everything, who works herself to exhaustion for people who don't even see her, who measures her worth by how much she can give before collapsing. That Samantha is gone. I left her at the bus terminal in Columbus. So, who am I now? Who do I want to be? I stopped writing, struck by this fundamental question. Who did I want to be? For so long, I had defined myself by my job, by how useful I could be to others. Without that, who was I? I didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time in years, I felt the freedom to find out. Sunday passed in a similar haze of peaceful solitude. I walked along the lake, read in a park, found a small art gallery, and spent hours wandering among paintings and sculptures. I ate when I was hungry, rested when I was tired, and thought about nothing more complicated than whether to have wine or beer with dinner. By Sunday evening, however, reality began to creep back in. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow, I would need to face Blake, face HR, face the consequences of my actions. I turned my phone on again, bracing for more angry messages. But surprisingly, there were only a few new ones, and none from Blake. It seemed the storm had passed, or at least paused. There was, however, a new email from HR requesting confirmation that I would attend the 9 a.m. meeting with Blake. I replied simply, "I'll be there." Then I booked a return ticket to Columbus for early Monday morning. Whatever happened next, I would face it head-on. That night, I packed my small suitcase and prepared to leave. Martha had been kind enough to offer to drive me to the bus station, saving me the cost of another rideshare. As I placed the last of my belongings in the suitcase, I realized I felt different. Still anxious about tomorrow, yes, but also stronger somehow. More solid. More myself. I slept surprisingly well, waking before my alarm to shower and dress with care. I chose my outfit deliberately. Not my usual office attire of bland, forgettable business casual, but a dress I loved but rarely wore to work. Emerald green, fitted, with subtle gold buttons. I applied makeup with more attention than usual, and wore my hair down instead of in its typical tight toe. Fun. If this was to be my last day at Urbanus, I would face it on my terms. Martha drove me to the station in her ancient Volvo, filling the short journey with cheerful chatter about the weather and local events. At the station, she surprised me by handing me a small paper bag. "Muffin for the road?" she said with a warm smile. "And my card. If you ever need a place to stay in Cleveland again, you call me directly. I'll save you room for." I thanked her, unexpectedly moved by this small kindness from someone who knew nothing of my situation, yet had somehow sensed I needed gentle handling. The bus ride back to Columbus was quicker than the journey out, the morning traffic moving smoothly along the highway. I used the time to gather my thoughts, to prepare for what I would say to Blake. I had no illusions about how the meeting would go. At best, a formal reprimand. At worst, termination. Strangely, I found I didn't mind either outcome as much as I would have expected. Something had shifted inside me during those 3 days in Cleveland. The fear of losing my job, of disappointing others, of failing to meet expectations. It hadn't disappeared, but it had diminished, replaced by something that felt almost like courage. By the time the bus arrived in Columbus, I had made a decision. I wouldn't apologize for leaving. I wouldn't beg to keep my job. I would be honest about why I had left and what I needed to stay, if staying was even what I wanted. I took a rideshare directly to the Urbanus building, arriving at 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes to compose myself before facing Blake. I stopped in the lobby bathroom to check my appearance one last time, then took the elevator to the 14th floor. The office was quieter than usual for a Monday morning. As I walked through the open workspace toward my desk, conversations halted. Heads turned. Eyes followed me, some curious, some sympathetic, some openly hostile. Word had clearly spread about my disappearing act on Friday. I kept my head high, my pace steady, ignoring the whispers that followed in my wake. At my desk, everything was exactly as I had left it Thursday evening. Files neatly stacked, pens lined up, family photo slightly crooked in its frame. I straightened the photo, set down my purse, and took a deep breath. It was 8:57 a.m. Time to face the music. Blake's office was at the end of the hall, a corner space with glass, walls that offered him a view of both the open workspace and the Columbus skyline. As I approached, I could see him through the glass, head bent over his laptop, fingers drumming impatiently on his desk. He hadn't noticed me yet. I knocked twice on the doorframe and his head snapped up. For a moment, surprise flickered across his face. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to actually show up before his expression settled into a careful neutrality. "Samantha, come in. Close the door." I did as instructed, then took a seat in one of the 2 chairs across from his desk without waiting to be invited. I placed my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremor and met his gaze steadily. Blake studied me for a moment, then leaned back in his chair with a sigh. "So, you want to tell me what happened on Friday?" His tone was conversational, almost casual, but I wasn't fooled. Blake Townsend didn't become a director at 35 by being forgiving of failure. "I think you know what happened," I replied, my voice calmer than I felt. "I didn't come in. I didn't prepare lunch for the Q3 ceremony." "Yes, that much is obvious." His fingers resumed their drumming. "What I want to know is why. This isn't like you, Sam. You've never let the team down before." There it was. The language of obligation, of team loyalty, of letting people down. The same language that had kept me cooking and cleaning and saying yes for 8 years. "I had an emergency," I said, the lie bitter on my tongue. Blake's eyebrows rose. An emergency that prevented you from calling? From sending a text? We were worried. About you, Sam. He leaned forward, voice softening. If something happened, you could have told us. We would have understood. For a moment, I almost wavered. The concern in his voice sounded genuine. Maybe he had been worried. Maybe they all had. But then I remembered how easily he had assigned me the task of feeding 60 people. How he hadn't asked if I could do it. He had simply assumed I would. How in 8 years he had never once noticed the toll all these little favors took on me. Nothing happened, I said finally. I just couldn't do it anymore. Confusion crossed his face. Couldn't do what? Any of it. The cooking, the cleaning, the staying late, the coming in early, the being everyone's mother and secretary and chef and therapist. I couldn't do it anymore, so I left. Blake blinked, clearly taken aback by my frankness. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then seemed to regroup. Sam, if you were feeling overwhelmed, you could have said something. We could have worked something out for the lunch. It didn't have to be this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing my absence, the ruined ceremony, the current awkward conversation. Could I have? I asked, genuinely curious. When you told me, not asked, told, that I needed to cook for 60 people, did it seem like saying no was an option? His expression hardened slightly. That's not fair. You've always handled the company events. You're good at it. People love your food. I know they do, but that's not my job, Blake. It never was. I'm an administrative coordinator. Nowhere in my job description. Does it say personal chef to the entire company? Oh, come on, Sam. We're a team here. Everyone pitches in. That's the culture at Urbanus. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Is it? Tell me, Blake, what does Craig in accounting pitch in with? Or Michael in legal? Or you, for that matter? When was the last time you stayed until 9 p.m. setting up for an event or came in at 5 a.m. to cook? A flush crept up his neck. That's different. We all contribute in our own ways. No, it's not different. It's exactly the same. Except somehow my contribution became doing all the things no one else wanted to do, on top of my actual job, for no extra pay and minimal recognition. Blake's expression was a mixture of discomfort and annoyance now. This clearly wasn't the conversation he had expected to have. Look, Sam, I appreciate that you feel undervalued, and maybe we could discuss adjusting your responsibilities. But the fact remains that you abandoned your duties on Friday with no notice, causing significant disruption and embarrassment to the company. The CEO was here. He had to eat takeout pizza. The absurdity of it. The idea that a CEO eating pizza was some grave tragedy nearly made me laugh again, but I held it in, knowing it would only further damage my already precarious position. I know, I said instead, and I'm sorry for the disruption. That wasn't my intention. This, at least, was true. I hadn't left to cause chaos. I had left to save myself. Blake nodded, seemingly relieved that we were back on script. Good. I'm glad you understand the seriousness of the situation. Now, HR has recommended a formal written warning, which will go in your file. And of course, there won't be a bonus for you this quarter. He reached into a folder on his desk and pulled out a document, sliding it across to me. If you sign this acknowledgement of the warning, we can put this behind us and move forward. I looked down at the paper but didn't pick it up. The language was formal, detailing my failure to perform assigned duties and unprofessional conduct. It made no mention of the fact that the assigned duties had never been part of my job to begin with. What if I don't sign it? I asked, looking back up at him. Blake's expression tightened. Sam, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. We're trying to work with you here. The alternative would be termination. I nodded slowly, considering. And if I sign it, what changes? Do I go back to being expected to cook for company events? To staying late without compensation? To being voluntold rather than asked? No one is forcing you to do anything, Blake said, a defensive edge in his voice. If you don't want to help with events anymore, fine. We'll find someone else. Will you? Or will you just find someone else to take advantage of? The words hung in the air between us. Blake's jaw tightened, and I could see I had pushed too far. I think you need to consider very carefully what you're saying and the position you're in right now, he said, his voice low. You're on thin ice, Samantha. Very thin ice. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not the intimidating boss I had feared for years, but just a man. a man who was used to getting his way, who had never had to think about the small indignities he inflicted on those beneath him in the hierarchy. And suddenly, I wasn't afraid anymore. You know what, Blake? I think I've done enough considering. I've spent 8 years considering everyone else's needs above my own. I'm done. I stood up, smoothing down my green dress. I quit. His expression shifted from anger to surprise, then to something like panic. Wait, what? You can't just quit. We need to discuss this. Think about what you're doing. I have thought about it, more clearly than I have in years. I picked up my purse from where I had set it beside the chair. I'll clean out my desk and be gone within the hour. I turned to leave, but Blake's voice stopped me at the door. Sam, wait. Let's not be hasty. What do you want? A raise? Different responsibilities? We can work something out. I turned back, surprised by the desperation in his tone. It occurred to me that perhaps Blake depended on me more than I had realized, not just for the cooking and the events, but for all the small ways I made his job easier, handled problems before they reached him, kept the office running smoothly. It's not about money, I said quietly. It's about respect, about being seen as a person, not just a resource to be used up. Blake ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I had seen countless times. I do respect you, Sam. We all do. You're invaluable to this team. Invaluable, but not valued. There's a difference. He sighed heavily. What would it take for you to stay? I considered the question seriously. Was there anything that would make me want to remain at Urbanus? After 8 years, did I owe it to myself or to them to try to make it work? I don't know, I admitted finally. But I do know I need some time to figure that out. Real time, not just a weekend. Blake nodded slowly. Okay. Take the rest of the week, paid leave. We can talk again on Monday, see where we stand. It was more than I had expected. Perhaps he truly did value me, in his way. Or perhaps he just dreaded the prospect of training someone new. All right, I agreed. I'll take the week, but I'm not promising anything. Fair enough. He attempted a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Just think about it, okay? You've been part of Urbanus for a long time. That counts for something. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak further. Then I turned and walked out of his office, past the curious eyes of my coworkers, to my desk. I gathered a few personal items. The family photo, a mug my niece had made me, a small plant that had somehow survived years of neglect, and placed them in my purse. The rest could stay. It wasn't as if I had made this space truly mine in all these years. As I prepared to leave, Jen from accounting approached, her expression sympathetic. You okay? She asked quietly. I considered the question. Was I okay? I had just quit, or almost quit, the only job I'd had since college. I had no backup plan, no clear next steps. By any reasonable measure, I should be panicking. But strangely, I wasn't. Yeah, I said, surprised to find it was true. I think I am. I left the Urbanus building feeling oddly weightless, as if I had shed not just a job, but an entire identity. The day was beautiful. Clear blue September sky, just enough breeze to rustle the trees lining the street, perfect walking weather. So I walked. With no particular destination in mind, I let my feet carry me through downtown Columbus, past familiar landmarks and restaurants where I'd grabbed hasty lunches, coffee shops where I'd picked up orders for meetings I never got to participate in. Eventually, I found myself in Goodale Park, a green oasis in the heart of the city. I found an empty bench near the pond and sat, watching ducks glide across the water and children play on the nearby playground. My phone buzzed with a text from Jen. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing. Drinks soon? I smiled and sent back a thumbs-up emoji. In 8 years at Urbanus, I hadn't made many close friends. Always too busy, too tired, too focused on proving my worth through work. Perhaps that could change now. As the afternoon wore on, I began to consider my options. I had savings, not a lot, but enough to sustain me for a few months if necessary. My apartment lease ran through December. My resume was woefully outdated, but my skills were solid. I could find another administrative position easily enough. But did I want another job like the one I'd just left? Another office where I might fall into the same patterns, become the same reliable, invisible Samantha? No. Whatever came. Next needed to be different. I opened my phone's browser and began to search. Job listings, yes, but also apartment rentals in Cleveland. The city had felt right somehow during my brief escape. Calmer than Columbus, yet still vibrant, and far enough from Urbanus that I wouldn't run into former colleagues at the grocery store. A fresh start. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. By evening, I had bookmarked several job opportunities and apartments to explore further. None were perfect, but they were possibilities. Doors opening where before I had seen only walls. I walked back to my apartment as the sun began to set, stopping to pick up takeout from a Thai restaurant I had always meant to try but never made time for. In my apartment, I ate directly from the containers, feet, propped on the coffee table, another small rebellion against my usual tidy habits. The food was delicious. Or maybe freedom was the seasoning that made everything taste better. I slept deeply that night and woke the next morning with no alarm, no schedule, no obligations. The day stretched before me, entirely my own. After breakfast, I opened my laptop and began to properly update my resume. 8 years at one company meant I had accumulated more skills and experiences than I initially realized. Project management, event coordination, client relations, crisis management, all things I had done well, if without recognition. Mid-morning, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Hello? Samantha Hayes? A woman's voice, professional but warm. Yes, speaking. This is Diane Lennox from Marigold Staffing. I hope you don't mind me calling out of the blue. Jennifer Carter suggested I reach out to you. She mentioned you might be looking for new opportunities. Jen. Of course. She worked with staffing agencies regularly through accounting. Yes, I am, actually, I replied, sitting up straighter. I'm taking some time to consider my options. Wonderful. Jennifer spoke very highly of your organizational skills and professionalism. We have a few positions that might interest someone with your background. Would you be open to discussing them? Absolutely, I said, reaching for a pen. I'm particularly interested in opportunities in Cleveland if you have any. There was a brief pause. Cleveland? Yes, we work with several clients there. May I ask why Cleveland specifically? I considered how to answer. The truth, that I had fled there during a moment of crisis and found unexpected peace, seemed too personal to share with a stranger. I'm looking for a change of pace, I said instead. New city, new opportunities. I understand completely, Diane replied, and I sensed she truly did. I have a few Cleveland-based possibilities in mind. Are you available for an in-person meeting tomorrow to discuss them? We set up an appointment for the following afternoon at her office. After hanging up, I felt a flutter of excitement. Things were moving quickly, perhaps too quickly, but after years of stagnation, the momentum felt good. I spent the rest of the day researching Cleveland more thoroughly, neighborhoods, costi of living, cultural attractions. By evening, I had a clearer picture of what a life there might look like. It wasn't a fully formed plan yet, but it was the beginning of one. That night, I found the journal I had started at the B&B and added a new entry. 2 days ago, I walked into Blake's office expecting to be fired. Instead, I almost quit. Now I'm contemplating moving to Cleveland and starting, over completely. Is this what a nervous breakdown looks like? Or is it what healing looks like? Maybe both. The strangest part is how right it feels. Like I've been sleepwalking for years and suddenly woken up. Everything is sharper, clearer. Even the fear, and there's plenty of that, feels more real than the numb security I had before. I don't know if I'll actually leave Columbus. I don't know if I'll quit Urbanus for good. But for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I have choices. Real choices. Not just the illusion of them. And that feels like freedom. The meeting with Diane Lennox the next day exceeded my expectations. Marigold Staffing was a boutique agency that specialized in placing administrative professionals in roles that valued their skills appropriately, with compensation and titles to match. What I'm hearing, Diane said after I described my experience at Urbanus, is that you've essentially been functioning as an office manager, event coordinator, and executive assistant, but with the title and salary of an administrative coordinator. Is that accurate? I guess so, yes. I had never framed it that way to myself. Unfortunately, that's all too common, she said, shaking her head. Companies often rely on conscientious employees to take on additional responsibilities without appropriate recognition or compensation. But it stops here. We only work with clients who value administrative professionals properly. She proceeded to tell me about 3 positions she had in mind, 2 in Columbus and 1 in Cleveland, all offered significantly higher salaries than I currently earned, along with clearer boundaries and expectations. The Cleveland position particularly caught my attention. office manager for a small but growing architectural firm called Lakeside Design Group. The role would involve overseeing administrative functions, coordinating with clients, and yes, occasionally planning events, but with a proper budget and support. Staff. They're looking for someone who can bring structure and efficiency to their office, Diane explained. They've grown quickly and need someone to help them professionalize their operations. The partners are very hands-on with the creative work, but recognize they need expertise for the business side. It sounded challenging, but in a good way. A role where my skills would be valued rather than exploited, where making things happen would be my actual job, not an unspoken expectation. I'd like to learn more about this one, I told her, pointing to the Lakeside listing. I thought you might. Diane smiled. I can arrange an interview for next week if you're interested. They're eager to fill the position. I hesitated only briefly before nodding. Yes, I'd like that. As I left Diane's office, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Excitement about the new possibilities, anxiety about such a major change, and underneath it all, a simmering anger at how long I had accepted being undervalued at Urbanus. Why had I never looked elsewhere? Why had I never demanded better treatment? Why had I allowed myself to become everyone's unpaid caterer and unofficial therapist? The questions followed. Me home, nagging at me as I prepared dinner, as I scrolled through more Cleveland apartment listings, as I tried to watch a movie to distract myself. By Thursday, I had scheduled an interview with Lakeside Design Group for the following Tuesday in Cleveland. I had also found 3 promising apartments to view while I was there. Things were moving quickly, perhaps too quickly, but I couldn't bring myself to slow down. Momentum felt too precious to waste. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Blake. Hope you're taking the time you need. The office isn't the same without you. Let's talk Monday? I stared at the message for a long time before responding simply, I'll see you Monday. I wasn't sure what I would say to him when we met. I wasn't sure if I was really prepared to leave Urbanus entirely, to leave Columbus to start over somewhere new. But I was sure of one thing. I couldn't go back to being the old Samantha, the one who said yes to everything, who burned herself out for people who didn't even notice the flames. That Samantha was gone. I had left her at the bus terminal at 5:07 a.m. a week ago, and whoever I was becoming, I liked her better already. Monday morning. Arrived with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I dressed with care. Another bold choice, a tailored navy pantsuit I'd purchased years ago but rarely worn, feeling it was somehow too assertive for daily office wear. Now it felt exactly right. As I prepared to leave for my meeting with Blake, I paused to look around my apartment. For the first time, I saw it through fresh eyes. The minimal decorations, the lack of personal touches, the sense that this was a place I slept rather than a place I lived. Like my desk at Urbanus, I had never truly made this space mine. That would change, whether I stayed in Columbus or moved to Cleveland. I arrived at Urbanus precisely at 9 a.m. The office was bustling with Monday morning activity, but conversations hushed as I walked through. Word had clearly spread about my meeting with Blake. I nodded politely to a few colleagues, but didn't stop to chat. Blake was waiting in his office, 2 cups of coffee on his desk, a peace offering, perhaps. He stood when I entered, gesturing to the chair across from him. Sam, good to see you. How was your week? Illuminating, I replied, taking the offered coffee but not elaborating further. He smiled, uncertainly. Good, that's good. Listen, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation last week, about what you said regarding being valued. I nodded, waiting. You were right, he continued, seeming to struggle with the admission. I have taken advantage of your willingness to help, and that wasn't fair. The acknowledgement was more than I had expected. Still, I remained silent, curious to see where this would lead. So I've been talking with the executive team, and we'd like to offer you a promotion. He pushed a folder across the desk. Senior Office Manager. It would come with a 15% raise, clearer boundaries around your responsibilities, and a budget for catering or support staff for company events. I opened the folder, scanning the formal offer letter inside. The title was certainly an improvement, as was the salary. The job description even explicitly mentioned occasional event coordination, with appropriate resources provided. It's a good offer, I acknowledged. Blake relaxed visibly. I'm glad you think so. We value you, Sam. I know we haven't always shown it properly, but we do. Urbanus needs you. A week ago, those words would have been enough. The validation I had been seeking for years, but now they felt insufficient. What about the culture, Blake? I asked. This addresses my specific situation. But what about the next person who gets voluntold to take on responsibilities beyond their job description? What changes for them? He shifted uncomfortably. Well, we're looking at some broader policy changes. Nothing concrete yet, but the HR team is working on it. Vague promises of future improvement. Classic Blake. I see, I said, closing the folder. Thank you for the offer. I'll need some time to consider it. His expression faltered. How much time? The executive team was hoping to announce your promotion at the next all-hands meeting on Friday. Of course they were. Public recognition after I had embarrassed them publicly. It made perfect sense. I have an interview tomorrow, I said, deciding honesty was the best approach. In Cleveland, for an office manager position with an architectural firm. Blake's eyebrows shot up. Cleveland? You're thinking of leaving Columbus? I'm considering all my options, I replied evenly. He leaned back in his chair, visibly processing this information. Sam, be reasonable. You've built a life here, a career. Are you really going to throw that away over one bad experience? It wasn't one bad experience, Blake. It was 8 years of small slights, of unpaid labor, of being taken for granted. The lunch was just the final straw. He sighed heavily. What can we do to make you stay? Name it. I considered the question seriously. What would it take for me to want to remain at Urbanus? The promotion was a good start, but was it enough to outweigh the fresh start Cleveland represented? I need to think about it, I said finally. I'll give you my decision by Thursday, after my interview. Blake didn't look happy about this timeline, but he nodded. Fair enough, but Sam, we really do want you to stay. I stood, gathering my purse. I appreciate that. I'll be in touch. As I turned to leave, he called after me. What about today? Are you coming back to work? I paused at the door. No, I'm taking the full week, as agreed. I'll see you Thursday. The rest of Monday passed in a flurry of preparation, reviewing materials about Lakeside Design Group, researching common interview questions, planning my trip to Cleveland. I booked a room at Martha's B&B, smiling at the thought of returning to room 4 so soon. Tuesday morning, I drove to Cleveland, arriving mid-afternoon. Martha greeted me like an old friend, enveloping me in a warm hug. Room 4 is all ready for you, she said with a wink. Must be fate, bringing you back so soon. Maybe it is, I replied, surprised to find I meant it. My interview with Lakeside Design Group was scheduled for Wednesday morning, giving me the evening to settle in and prepare. I walked to the lake again, finding the same bench where I had sat during my impromptu escape. The water was choppier today, whitecaps visible in the distance, but still beautiful in its vastness. I thought about Blake's offer, about Urbanus, about the life I had built in Columbus. It wasn't a terrible life. With the promotion, it might even be a good one. But would it ever be truly mine? Or would it always be shaped by others' expectations, by patterns established years ago? Cleveland, by contrast, offered a blank slate. New job, new apartment, new routines. The freedom to define myself on my own terms. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. Wednesday morning, I arrived at Lakeside Design Group's offices 15 minutes early. The space was beautiful. A renovated warehouse with exposed brick walls, tall windows overlooking the lake, and an open floor plan filled with drafting tables and design boards. I was greeted by Elena Winters, one of the founding partners, a woman in her early 40s with silver-streaked dark hair and an easy smile. Samantha, welcome. Thank you for making the trip from Columbus. She introduced me to her partner, James Chen, and their current office administrator, Tessa, who was leaving to pursue a master's degree. The interview was conversational rather than formal, focused more on problem-solving approaches than specific experiences. What we're really looking for, Elena explained, is someone who can bring order to our creative chaos. We're excellent architects, but terrible at paperwork. James nodded ruefully. True. Very true. We need someone who isn't afraid to tell us when we're making administrative messes and how to fix them. I found myself smiling. I can definitely do that. We discussed the role in detail, the responsibilities, expectations, challenges. They were upfront about the firm's growing pains and the learning curve involved, but they were equally clear about the value they placed on the position. This isn't a support role in our minds, Elena emphasized. It's a leadership role. You would be managing the business operations of the firm, freeing us to focus on design. We see it as a partnership. The interview lasted nearly 2 hours, concluding with a tour of the office and introductions to the small staff, 3 junior architects, AI Kaye, draftsperson, and an intern. Everyone seemed genuinely happy to be there, the atmosphere collaborative rather than competitive. As we wrapped up, Elena walked me out. "When do you need to let your current employer know about your decision?" she asked. "Thursday," I replied. "Tomorrow." She nodded. "We won't keep you waiting then. James and I just need to confer briefly, but you'll have our decision by this evening." I thanked her and headed out, stopping at a nearby cafe to decompress. The interview had gone well, better than well. I could envision myself in that light-filled office, bringing order to their creative chaos, being valued for exactly the skills that had been taken for granted at Urbanus. But was I really ready to leave Columbus? To start over completely? I spent the afternoon viewing apartments, a modern one-bedroom in a high-rise with a gym and rooftop terrace, a quirky loft in a converted factory, and a charming unit in a historic building just blocks from the lake. Each had its appeal. Each represented a different version of the life I might build here. By evening, I was back at the B&B, sipping tea in the parlor and trying not to check my phone every 2 minutes. When it finally rang at 7:34 p.m., I nearly spilled my tea in my haste to answer. "Samantha, it's Elena Winters. I'm calling with good news. We'd like to offer you the office manager position at Lakeside." Relief and excitement flooded through me. "Thank you, Elena. I'm thrilled." "We are too. Your experience is exactly what we need, and your perspective on administrative leadership aligns perfectly with our vision for the role." We discussed the details: salary, considerably higher than even Blake's offered raise, benefits, start date options. She promised to email the formal offer letter that evening for my review. "Take the time you need to consider it," she said. "Though I hope you'll say yes." After we hung up, I sat motionless for several minutes, processing. I had options. Now, real options, not just the illusion of choice. Urbanus's promotion, or Lakeside's fresh start. Columbus's familiarity, or Cleveland's new possibilities. For the first time in years, the decision was truly mine to make. Not shaped by obligation or fear, or the weight of others' expectations, but by what I actually wanted for myself. I slept surprisingly well that night, and woke with unexpected clarity. Over breakfast, I carefully read through Lakeside's offer letter, then Blake's. Both were good opportunities on paper, but only one felt right in my heart. At 9 a.m., I called Blake. "I've made my decision," I said when he answered. "I'm not accepting the promotion. I'm resigning from Urbanus, effective 2 weeks from today." There was a long pause before he responded. "Is there anything I can say to change your mind?" "No," I replied gently. "This isn't about the money or the title. It's about needing a fresh start. I've accepted a position in Cleveland." Another pause. "I understand," he said finally, and to my surprise, he sounded like he genuinely did. "We'll miss you, Sam. The place won't be the same without you." "Thank you, Blake. Will you come in today? Help us plan for the transition?" I considered this. Part of me wanted a clean break, but a larger part recognized the value in ending things properly, not just for Urbanus, but for my own sense of closure. "Yes, I'll be there this afternoon." After hanging up, I immediately called Elena to accept Lakeside's offer. Then I sat on the edge of the bed, breathing deeply, allowing the magnitude of what I had just done to sink in. I was leaving Urbanus, leaving Columbus, starting over in Cleveland. It should have felt terrifying. Instead, it felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. My final 2 weeks at Urbanus passed in a blur of handover meetings, documentation, and surprisingly heartfelt goodbyes. Word of my departure spread quickly, and the reactions were illuminating. Some colleagues were shocked, unable to imagine Urbanus without me. Others congratulated me with an enthusiasm that suggested they understood exactly why I was leaving. A few even confided that they had been reconsidering their own positions at the company. Most surprising was the response from upper management. The CEO, the same one who had suffered through pizza at the Q3 ceremony, called me personally to express regret at my departure and to wish me well. HR instituted an immediate review of job descriptions and unofficial expectations across the company, and Blake, to his credit, seemed genuinely committed to addressing the issues I had raised. He consulted me on hiring my replacement, emphasizing to candidates that event coordination would be optional, compensated and supported with adequate resources. "Your leaving has been a wake-up call," he admitted during our final one-on-one meeting. "Not just for me, but for the whole leadership team. We never meant to take advantage of your willingness to help, but that's exactly what we did." I appreciated his honesty, even if it came too late to change my decision. My last day arrived with unexpected emotion. Jen from accounting organized a farewell. Lunch. Catered, she emphasized with a knowing smile. Colleagues presented me with a gift card to a home goods store for your new place in Cleveland, and a card signed by everyone, including several notes that brought tears to my eyes. You taught me to value my own time, wrote Craig from marketing. Your courage inspired me to set better boundaries, added Michelle from HR. We never deserved you, but we were lucky to have you, wrote Jen. Even Blake's note surprised me. Thank you for the wake-up call. Urbanus will be better because you were brave enough to leave. As I packed the last of my personal items into a box, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Sadness at leaving people I had known for 8 years, anxiety about the changes ahead, but predominantly a sense of quiet triumph. I had advocated for myself, made a difficult choice, and now stood on the threshold of a new chapter. I had rescued myself. The following Monday, I drove to Cleveland with my car packed to capacity. The apartment I had chosen, the charming unit in the historic building near the lake, awaited me, empty and full of possibility. Martha had insisted on helping me move in, arriving with homemade muffins and a small plant for my windowsill. Every new home needs something living, she said, placing the plant on the kitchen counter. Something to grow alongside you. That first week was a whirlwind of unpacking, furniture shopping, and exploring my new neighborhood. I discovered a farmer's market around the corner, a bookstore that hosted author readings, a cafe where the barista remembered my order after just 2 visits. I also began to make my apartment truly mine in a way my Columbus place had never been. Hanging art I loved rather than generic prints. Arranging furniture for comfort rather than just functionality. Splurging on luxurious bedding because it brought me joy. My first day at Lakeside Design Group felt like stepping into a future I had created for myself. Elena welcomed me with a proper orientation, introducing me to systems and processes while emphasizing that I had the authority to change anything that didn't work efficiently. That's why we hired you, she said. For your expertise. We're architects, not administrators. We need your perspective. The contrast with my early days at Urbanus, where I had been expected to adapt to their ways rather than contribute my own insights, couldn't have been more stark. By the end of my first month in Cleveland, I had established new routines, begun to make friends, and settled into my role at Lakeside. The work was challenging, but rewarding, my contributions visibly valued. When I stayed late, it was by choice, not expectation. When I offered suggestions, they were considered seriously. And yes, I occasionally helped, with office events, but with a budget, assistance, and explicit recognition. The first time I baked cookies for a client meeting, Elena thanked me profusely, but also immediately added catering budget to the next staff meeting agenda. We appreciate the gesture, she said, but that's not what we're paying you for. Your brain is far more valuable to us than your baking skills. 6 months after my dawn escape from Columbus, I received an unexpected email from Jen. Subject line: You started something. Thought you'd want to know, she wrote. Urbanus has officially instituted a new policy on voluntary additional duties. Any work outside job descriptions must now be formally acknowledged, compensated, and distributed equitably. They're calling it the Hayes Protocol, behind closed doors, though officially it's just the additional duties policy. Figured you'd appreciate the impact you've had, even from afar. I smiled as I read her words, feeling a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. My leaving hadn't just changed my life, it had created ripples that might improve things for others at Urbanus. That evening, I walked to the lake as the sun began to set, finding my bench along the shore path. The water stretched before me, vast and changeable, catching the fading light in patterns of gold and crimson. In the distance, a ship moved slowly across the horizon, heading out toward open water. I thought about that morning at the bus terminal, how terrified I had been, how uncertain of what would come next, how leaving had felt like jumping off a cliff, not knowing if I would fall or fly. I had flown, not without turbulence, not without moments of doubt, but I had found my wings along the way. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Team dinner tonight to celebrate landing the museum project. Reservations at 8. Your presence requested, but absolutely not required if you have other plans. I smiled at the wording, so different from Blake's casual assumptions, and texted back, I'll be there. Congratulations on the project. As I stood to head home and change for dinner, I took one last look at the lake, at the sky turning from gold to deep blue, at the city lights beginning to twinkle along the shore. Cleveland wasn't perfect. My job wasn't perfect. My new life wasn't perfect. but it was mine, chosen deliberately, shaped by my own desires. And boundaries, not by others' expectations or my fear of disappointment. Being reliable hadn't made me valuable at Urbanus. It had made me invisible. Standing up for myself, walking away when necessary, choosing my own path, that had made me visible again. First to myself and then to others who truly saw me. I had learned that saying yes too often doesn't make you indispensable. It makes you expendable. That sometimes the only way to teach others your worth is to stop offering yourself for free. Most importantly, I had learned that the hardest person to say no to isn't your boss, your colleagues, or even your friends. It's the voice inside that tells you to keep people-pleasing, to prioritize others' needs above your own, to measure your worth by how much you give rather than by how truly you live. That morning at the terminal, when I chose myself over 60 hungry employees, I wasn't abandoning my responsibilities. I was finally embracing the most important one, the responsibility to honor my own worth, to protect my own light, to live my one wild and precious life with intention rather than obligation. As I walked home through the gathering twilight, I thought of all the Samanthas still out there, still saying yes when they meant no, still burning themselves out for people who wouldn't even thank them for the ashes. I hoped they would find their terminals, their moments of clarity, their courage to step onto buses bound for unknown destinations. I hoped they would discover, as I had, that being reliable doesn't mean being replaceable, and that being generous doesn't mean giving until you disappear.